Halloween night had finally arrived, and my friends and I were determined to make it the spookiest yet. We were a group of fearless teenagers, armed with pillowcases for candy and the audacity to venture into the scariest parts of our town. There was this house a few blocks away from us that everybody knew about due to how creepy it was. That house would end up being our target for the night. As we roamed the dimly lit streets, we discussed all the different rumors we had heard about that house. We were aware it had been abandoned for years, but none of us knew exactly how long. Some people said they could hear noises like people talking or screaming coming from inside. Others said the house is definitely occupied by someone or something. Tonight, we were determined to find out what was behind those walls. The house turned out to be scarier than the rumors described. It was severely burned on the outside. We couldn't even tell what color it used to be because it was a charcoal black now. The windows were shattered and boarded up. The front gate had long since fallen apart. A twisted iron fence surrounded the property, and the yard was overgrown with weeds that reached out like fingers. As we approached the house, my heart started to race. I seriously wanted to turn back at that point, but I didn't want to look like a punk in front of my friends. We all exchanged nervous glances and decided to press on. After all, it was Halloween, and we craved the thrill of a good scare. We approached the front door, and to our surprise, it was already slightly open. The creaking hinges seemed to beckon us inside, and we couldn't resist. We stepped into the gloomy foyer, our flashlights cutting through the darkness. The air inside was heavy, with the scent of age and decay. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind us, and we all jumped in terror. Panic set in as we realized we were trapped inside this scary house. Frantic attempts to push the door open were futile, as if someone was holding it firmly closed. As our hearts pounded, we heard faint whispers echoing through the hallways, beckoning us deeper into the house. The walls seemed to close in on us as we cautiously made our way through the shadowy corridors. Each step brought us closer to something malevolent, something that had been lurking in the darkness for far too long. In one room, we found a table set for a tea party, complete with dusty porcelain dolls that seemed to watch our every move. In another, we stumbled upon a collection of old, cracked mirrors that distorted our reflections into grotesque figures. As we ventured deeper into the house, we came to a decrepit staircase leading to the basement. A flickering light lured us downward, and our curiosity got the better of us. The basement was damp and smelled of mildew, with a single dimly lit room at the end of the corridor. As we cautiously approached, we saw a figure huddled in the corner, its back to us. It was muttering incoherently, its voice a chilling mixture of anger and despair. I shined my light on the figure, and it slowly turned to reveal a disfigured face and a sinister smile that sent terror coursing through our veins. I shined my light on the figure, and it slowly turned to reveal a disfigured face and a sinister smile that sent terror coursing through our veins. Without warning, it lunged at us, its movements unnatural and grotesque. Panic set in as we fought for our lives, desperately crawling our way back up the stairs and towards the front door. We could hear the haunting laughter of the figure pursuing us, its malevolent presence closing in. Just as we reached the front door, it swung open, revealing the moonlit night outside. We stumbled onto the porch, gasping for breath, and the door slammed shut behind us once again. As we looked back at that house, we realized that whatever resided there was not done with us. It had allowed us to escape, but it knew we would never truly be free from its grasp. The chilling laughter echoed in our minds as we made our way back to the safety of the Halloween-lit streets, forever haunted by the night we dared to enter that house. Hey guys, it's me, Claire. I'm at home alone right now, narrating these stories, and I'm not gonna lie, it's kind of creepy. So, if you're enjoying so far, subscribe, become my friend, talk to me in the comments, and help me feel less alone. All right, let's get back to the stories. Bye! It was a typical Halloween night, and my wife Sarah and I were looking forward to our yearly tradition of passing out candy to the neighborhood kids. Our porch was adorned with cobwebs, carved pumpkins, and flickering candles, creating an eerie atmosphere that delighted all who dared to visit. Little did we know that this Halloween would take a sinister turn. As darkness settled in, we settled on the porch, a bowl of assorted candies in hand. The chill in the air was refreshing, and the distant howling in the wind added to the spookiness of the night. Children dressed as witches, vampires, and superheroes started trickling in with their parents. Our excitement grew as we greeted each little ghost and goblin, delighting in their squeals of joy when they received their treats. Then he appeared. A tall, lanky figure emerged from the shadows, his face hidden beneath a mask. The mask bore an eerie grin, its cracked and peeling paint revealing a maddening smile. He wore a tattered black coat that rustled in the wind, and I couldn't help but shiver as I handed him a piece of candy. His gloved hand brushed against mine, and it was ice cold. "Trick or treat," he whispered, his voice sending a shiver down my spine. It was a voice devoid of humanity, a whisper from the abyss. We tried to dismiss the unsettling feeling he left us with as just a part of the Halloween fun, but it lingered like a stubborn ghost. As he walked away, we noticed that he didn't join the other kids on their merry way. Instead, he stood across the street under a flickering lamppost staring at our house. I turned to Sarah. "Did you see that?" I asked, my voice quivering. Sarah nodded, her eyes fixed on the bizarre figure. "Maybe he's just a teenager, trying to be creepy for Halloween." She tried to reassure me, but the unease in her voice was evident. With a sense of foreboding, we continued to hand out candy to the other children, but our eyes kept drifting back to the figure in black. He remained motionless in the dark. Hours passed, and most of the children had left with their bags of candy. It was well past bedtime for the little ones, but the figure in black continued to haunt us from his spot under the lamppost. Our concern grew as we realized he wasn't there for treats. He was there for something else entirely. "I'm going to call the police," Sarah finally said, her voice trembling. It was an unsettling decision to make on Halloween, but our fear was overpowering any thoughts of superstition. As Sarah reached for her phone, a sudden knock at the door made us both jump. We exchanged a worried glance, knowing we hadn't heard any footsteps approaching. The knock came again, louder this time. Slowly, I stood and cautiously approached the door. I peered through the peephole, but there was no one in sight. Just as I was about to dismiss it as a prank, the masked figure appeared in the peephole's view. My heart raced, and I stumbled back, gasping for air. "Open up." His chilling whisper reached me even through the door. The voice was menacing, and I could feel it crawling under my skin. "Call the police," I hissed to Sarah, who had paled at the sight of the masked stalker. I heard her dialing 911, her voice quivering as she explained our situation to the dispatcher. In the meantime, the relentless knocking continued, growing louder and more frantic with each passing moment. I knew we were running out of time. Desperation seized me, and I knew I had to confront this menace head on. I grabbed a heavy candlestick from the nearby table, my heart pounding in my chest. As I approached the door, the knocking stopped. For a moment, everything was eerily quiet. But then I heard the whisper again. "Open up, or you'll regret it." With a deep breath, I swung the door open, determined to face whatever horror lurked on the other side. But there was nothing there. The porch was empty, the masked figure gone. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. The police arrived shortly after, taking our statement and reassuring us as they would patrol the area throughout the night. They had no leads, no clues about the strange figure in black. Sarah and I sat in our living room, clung to each other, our nerves frayed, and our sense of security shattered. As dawn broke and the first rays of sunlight crept through the windows, we thought we had escaped the clutches of the masked stalker, but we couldn't shake the feeling that he was out there, waiting in the shadows, ready to return on another Halloween night. Since that sinister Halloween, we moved to a different neighborhood, hoping to leave the nightmare behind. But every October 31st, as the air grows cooler and the wind howls in the night, we still find ourselves glancing out the window, fearing the return of the masked figure who haunted us, a memory that refuses to fade away. Halloween will never be the same for us, forever tainted by the chilling encounter with the unknown, reminding us that not all masks are meant for fun and games. On that fateful Halloween night, I found myself on a deserted road, far from civilization. The moon hung in the inky sky, casting an eerie glow upon the desolate landscape. The ominous howling of the wind seemed to whisper tales of ghosts and ghouls. A single thought consumed me: to escape this eerie night alive. My car had betrayed me, its engine sputtering to a stop in the heart of nowhere. Panic crawled at my chest, but there was no other choice. With trembling hands and a pounding heart, I ventured into the woods, guided only by the dim light of my flashlight. The trees seemed to close in around me, their twisted branches reaching out like skeletal fingers, and the forest floor crackled with brittle leaves of countless autumns. It felt as though I had stepped into a different world, a world where the spirits of Halloween came to life. My flashlight flickered and died, leaving me surrounded in darkness. Desperation took hold, and I stumbled blindly forward, praying for a sanctuary. And then, as if by some stroke of fate, I came upon an old cabin. The cabin stood like a relic from a forgotten time, its time-worn wood and moss-covered roof painting a picture of abandonment. Desperation urged me forward, and with trembling hands, I pushed open the creaking door. The hinges groaned as if warning me of the horror that lay within. My flashlight cast a dim glow on the interior. Shadows danced on the cabin's cracked walls, and the air was heavy with the scent of decay. Cobwebs hung like drapes, and dust-covered furniture gave the place an aura of abandonment. My breath quickened, and I hesitated, but my fear of the night outside drove me deeper into the cabin. As I moved through the gloom, a sense of dread took hold. It was then that I heard it, a sound that sent chills down my spine. A low, guttural growl, like nothing I had ever heard before. My heart raced, and I turned, shining my dying flashlight into the darkness. From the shadows, emerged a grotesque figure, a humanoid monster that defied description. Its skin was a sickly gray, stretched tight over a skeletal frame. Its eyes glowed with evil, piercing me with their intensity. A twisted grin revealed jagged, yellow teeth. I had stumbled into the lair of a monster. Fear surged through me, but I had no choice but to fight for my life. My flashlight fell from my trembling hand, and I searched desperately for a weapon. My fingers closed around a rusted pipe, and I gripped it with all my strength. The monster lunged, and instinct took over. I swung the pipe, striking it across the chest. It let out a defying, inhumane scream that reverberated through the cabin. The force of the blow sent it crashing into a rickety table, shattering it into pieces. With adrenaline coursing through my veins, I made a dash for the door, but the monster was not finished. It rose, its bones audibly cracking as it did. And with a speed that defied its grotesque form, it pursued me. I stumbled out into the night, my heart pounding, my breath ragged. The moonlight illuminated the path ahead, guiding me through the twisted woods. Every rustle, every creak of the forest seemed to be the monster approaching. I had to find safety, had to escape this nightmare. The cabin was now a distant memory, but the monster's presence lingered. Every rustle, every creak of the forest seemed to be the monster's approach. I had to find safety, had to escape this nightmare. The cabin was now a distant memory, but the monster's presence lingered, an unshakable terror. I could hear its growls in the wind, the whispers of the night conspiring against me. My desperate flight led me deeper into the woods, and I lost all sense of direction. Panic gnawed at the edges of my mind as exhaustion threatened to overtake me. It felt as though the very forest itself was alive, plotting to keep me within its grasp. Finally, when all hope seemed lost, I stumbled upon a clearing. Before me lay the road, my car in the distance. Relief washed over me, and I sprinted toward it, praying that it would start. The engine roared to life, and I sped away from that haunted place. As I left the cursed woods behind, I couldn't help but wonder if the cabin and the monstrous creature were part of some ancient, malevolent Halloween ritual. Or perhaps it was a sinister force that only dared to reveal itself on the darkest of nights. The memory of that Halloween still haunts me, a tale I recount with trepidation. I survived that night, but I can never be sure what horrors lurk in the shadows on Halloween's Eve, waiting for the next unsuspecting soul to stumble into their grasp. I had been dating James for several months when he invited me to visit his parents' secluded cabin deep in the woods. He had spoken fondly of his family and the peaceful getaway, so I was excited to finally meet them. Little did I know that this visit would unravel a chilling tale of secrets and horror. We arrived at the cabin on a misty Friday evening. The cabin itself was quaint, nestled among towering trees that seemed to close in around it. As we entered, I couldn't help but notice the amount of tension that hung in the air. His parents greeted us with strained smiles, their eyes avoiding mine. I tried to dismiss it as nerves, but something felt off. "Hey, it's nice to finally meet you both. James talks about you all the time."
Does he now? We're glad you could join us," James's father said. His mother just stood there with a smile that seemed forced on her face.
"Thank you. This cabin is lovely. It's so secluded out here."
Yes, we cherish our privacy. It's peaceful. So, what do you both like to do for fun around here? I said, wondering if James's mother would say anything. We have our little hobbies. You know, collecting things. That sounds interesting. I guess everyone has their own interests. Yes. All right. I think I'll go freshen up. It was nice talking to you both. Yes, freshen up, rest well. As the evening wore on, their odd behavior became more apparent. They rarely spoke and seemed distant, almost as if they were hiding something. The atmosphere grew stiffening, and I found myself yearning for the safety of my own home. That night, I heard hushed voices outside my window. Curiosity getting the better of me, I peered out and saw James talking to his father. Their conversation was heated, and their gestures were frantic. Whatever they were discussing, they didn't want me to know. The following morning, I decided to take a walk around the property. I thought some fresh air might help shake off the unease that had settled over me. As I wandered, I stumbled upon an old shed tucked away behind some bushes. A strange intuition drew me closer, and as I opened the creaking door, my heart dropped. Inside the shed were shelves lined with jars. My stomach turned as I realized the jars contained human remains. There were teeth, eyes, hands, and even a human head. My mind raced, and I struggled to comprehend the horrifying scene before me. I began to feel my lunch starting to come up, but I didn't have time to get sick. My shock turned to panic when I heard footsteps approaching. I darted out of the shed and managed to find a hiding spot nearby. It was James, holding several empty glass jars. His parents joined him, their faces contorted with something that looked like twisted glee. They spoke in hushed tones about a deal they had made and how the jars were part of some dark ritual. My heart pounded as I realized I was in the presence of something sinister, something far beyond my understanding. I knew I had to leave, but the path back to the cabin was blocked by James and his parents. As they drew closer, I scrambled to my feet and ran deeper into the woods. The underbrush tore at my clothes and skin, but fear propelled me forward. After what felt like an eternity, I stumbled upon a small road and managed to hitch a ride back to town. Once I was safe, I contacted the police, sharing the horrifying truth I had uncovered. The investigation that followed uncovered a history of disturbing practices, cult-like rituals, and disappearances of several individuals over the years. James and his parents were arrested, their true nature exposed to the world. The experience left me shaken to my core, forever haunted by the memory of those jars and what James and his family may have had in store for me.
On Halloween night, I found myself alone in an old, decrepit hospital. The wind howled outside, and the full moon cast eerie shadows through the broken windows. The place had been abandoned for years, but I couldn't resist the temptation to explore it on the spookiest night of the year. As I walked down the dimly lit hallway, I could hear the faint creaking of rusty hospital beds. The air was thick, with a musty, long-forgotten odor that sent shivers down my spine. I had always been drawn to all things spooky and scary, and this place seemed like the perfect setting for my Halloween adventure. I made my way deeper into the hospital, my footsteps echoing in the silence. The only source of light came from my feeble flashlight, which flickered unpredictably. The flickering only added to the eerie atmosphere, making me feel as if the hospital itself was alive and breathing. The hospital was said to be haunted, and I couldn't help but wonder if I would encounter any ghosts or otherworldly spirits. But as I continued my exploration, it wasn't the supernatural that filled me with dread. It was the realization that I wasn't alone. From the shadows, a figure emerged. He was a man, or at least he appeared to be. His face was concealed by a grotesque mask, one that seemed to be made of a patchwork of animal hides. The mask had uneven, jagged openings for eyes, and through them, I could see the glint of malevolence. My heart raced as I watched the masked man approach. His heavy, laboring breaths was the only sound in the hallway. I tried to speak, to ask him what he was doing here, but the words got stuck in my throat. He moved closer, and I could see that he was holding a rusty, blood-stained scalpel. I stumbled backwards, my flashlight slipping from my trembling hands. The room was plunged into darkness, and the man's eerie mask seemed to glow in a sinister light of its own. In that moment, I realized that I was trapped in a horror story of my own making. The man's raspy voice broke the silence. "You should have never come here," he hissed. The words sent chills down my spine, and I could feel the malevolent intent in his voice. I fumbled in the dark, searching for an escape. My fingers brushed against something cold and metallic, and I grasped it tightly. It was a discarded bedpan, not much of a weapon, but it was all I had. With the bedpan in hand, I made a break for it, sprinting down the hallway as fast as I could. The masked man pursued me, his heavy footsteps echoing behind me. The hospital seemed to stretch on forever, the walls closing in on me, and the air growing colder every step. I turned a corner and stumbled into a room, slamming the door shut behind me. It was a small, dimly lit space, filled with ancient medical equipment. I could hear the masked man's labored breathing on the other side of the door. I knew I couldn't stay in that room forever. I had to find a way out of the hospital and away from the man in the mask. I looked around for any means of escape and spotted a small window. It was high up on the wall, but I knew I had to try. I climbed onto a rusted gurney and managed to reach the window. I pushed it open and squeezed through, my heart pounding with fear. I found myself outside, standing in the hospital's overgrown courtyard. But the relief was short-lived. The masked man was now standing in the courtyard, his dark figure illuminated by the moonlight. He raised the scalpel, and I knew I had to run. I dashed through the tangled underbrush, my heart racing, and the man in the mask close in pursuit. The night seemed endless, and the trees looming like silent sentinels, and the wind howling like the tormented souls of the hospital's past. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I stumbled onto a narrow road. A car was approaching in the distance, and I waved frantically, hoping for salvation. The car screeched to a halt, and a kind-hearted stranger let me in. I blurted out my story, and they drove me to safety, away from the haunted hospital and the masked man. As I looked back at the hospital through the rearview window, I saw the masked man standing in the road, his mask an eerie, haunting silhouette in the moonlight. It was a Halloween night I would never forget. A night when my fascination with everything spooky and creepy had led me down a path of terror and survival. As I gazed at the masked man disappearing in the distance, I knew that the horror of that night would stay with me forever, a chilling reminder of the dangers that can lurk in the shadows of even the most mundane places. It's been years since that nightmarish Halloween. We were just a group of teenagers looking for a good laugh, never expecting the darkness that would follow. It all started with Mark, a shy and quiet introverted boy who had always been an easy target for bullies. His biggest fear was clowns, and we, a group of mean-spirited kids, decided to exploit that fear. Mark lived in a house on the corner of Rose Street, a gloomy place that seemed to have a permanent shadow hanging over it. His reclusive nature and fear of clowns had made him an outcast, and we saw him as the perfect target for our Halloween night prank. It wasn't enough to simply scare him. We wanted to traumatize him, to remind him of the torment he had endured. The plan was simple. We gathered at my house, and I volunteered to be the one to carry out the prank. I put on a creepy clown costume, complete with a white face, red nose, and a sinister smile. As I stood in the dimly lit street, I felt a strange thrill of excitement and dread. The night was chilly, and the moon cast eerie shadows, adding to the ominous atmosphere. With my heart pounding, I approached Mark's house and slipped into the shadows. My clown makeup concealed my identity, and I could barely see through the costume's oversized mask. I waited in the darkness, clutching a balloon filled with fake blood. My friends watched from a distance, eager to see Mark's reaction. As Mark's footsteps drew near, my pulse quickened, and I released the balloon, letting it burst with a loud pop. Mark let out a terrified scream, stumbling backwards, running for his front door. He tripped and fell face first onto the pavement. My friends erupted into laughter, but I was too focused on Mark's reaction to enjoy the moment. His terror was palpable, and it sent a shiver down my spine. It was then that I realized the true extent of the cruelty we had unleashed. That night haunted me, and my laughter turned to guilt. I couldn't shake the image of Mark's fear-stricken face as he stared at the menacing clown before him. It was an image that would forever be etched into my memory. The weeks following the prank, Mark disappeared from school, and his family claimed they were relocating to get away from the trauma he had endured. We had accomplished our goal. We had driven Mark away. But the satisfaction of our petty victory was short-lived. Years passed, and our lives continued. We had all moved on from that fateful Halloween night, but Mark's face still haunted my dreams. It was a constant reminder of the torment we had subjected him to, and I couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease. Then, one Halloween night, he returned. I was alone at my house, engrossed in an eerie horror movie playing on my TV, when I heard laughter drifting in from outside. At first, I brushed it off as a byproduct of the movie I was watching, my imagination running wild. But the sinister laughter persisted, growing louder and more demented with each passing moment. Goosebumps prickled my skin as I approached the window, curiosity mixed with fear. There, under the street lamp, stood a clown. Not just any clown, but an unsettling figure that seemed utterly out of place in our quiet suburban neighborhood. His mask concealed his face, making it impossible to discern his intentions or emotions. The sheer sight of him sent a shiver down my spine. I watched in silent dread as the clown began to approach my front porch. His slow, deliberate steps were enough to send a sense of unease deep into my gut. It was as if he knew something I didn't, and I couldn't shake the feeling that he was after me. My heart pounded, and I knew I had to secure the house. With trembling hands, I locked all the doors and windows, the feeling of isolation and vulnerability creeping over me. The room seemed constricted, the shadows growing darker and the silence heavier. It was just me against the sinister clown, who now stood at my front door, tapping it lightly. The rhythmic, ominous tapping echoed through the house, setting my nerves on edge. With each tap, my imagination conjured up horrific scenarios. My mind raced, and I debated calling the police, but I feared taking my eyes off the clown. I decided to stand my ground, hoping he would eventually leave. Moments later, a loud crash reverberated through the house. My heart leaped into my throat as I realized the clown had forced his way inside. Panic overtook me, and I fumbled to find something, anything, to defend myself. My gaze darted around the room, finally landing on a heavy brass lamp. As the clown's heavy footsteps approached, I gripped the lamp as tight as I could. With a deep breath, I swung it with all my might, the metal crashing against the side of the intruder's head. He staggered back, his laughter now turning into an eerie, high-pitched cackle. I took the opportunity to flee, darting into the kitchen. The clown pursued me, his laughter and heavy footsteps following. I grabbed a kitchen knife, my trembling hand struggling to grip it firmly. He lunged at me, and I swung the knife, narrowly missing his masked face. Our struggle was frantic, a terrifying dance of survival and madness. In the midst of the chaos, I managed to grab the edge of the clown's mask, and with a fierce tug, I ripped it off. As the mask fell to the floor, my heart stopped. Staring back at me was a face I recognized all too well. It was Mark. Tears welled in my eyes as confusion and disbelief washed over me. Mark had invaded my house and was terrorizing me, just as I had done him all those years ago. He was still laughing, his voice twisted and manic. "Mark, please don't," I pleaded, hoping he would stop, but knowing I didn't deserve his mercy. He didn't respond. Mark's eyes, once familiar and warm, were now cold and hollow. It was as if he had been consumed by a malevolent force, a darkness that had taken hold of him. I knew I had to escape. With every ounce of strength left, I pushed Mark away and sprinted towards the front door. I reached it and glanced back one last time, seeing Mark standing there, his clown mask on the floor, his laughter haunting the air. I burst out of the house and into the chilling night, gasping for breath. The clown was behind me, but I didn't dare look back. I could feel his presence, his laughter echoing in my ears, even as I ran through the dimly lit streets of our once peaceful neighborhood. The horror I had witnessed was beyond anything I could have ever imagined, a surreal nightmare brought to life. On the night of Halloween, the moon hung low and pale in the sky, casting a silvery glow over the rural farming community of Willowbrook. The streets were lined with pumpkins, their flickering candlelight a beacon of warmth and comfort against the darkness that loomed. Children dressed as witches, superheroes, and ghouls ran from house to house, their laughter a joyful contrast to the eerie quiet of the countryside. It was a night like any other Halloween in Willowbrook, or so I thought. But little did I know, the sinister scarecrow, a malevolent figure that had haunted our town for generations, was about to make its presence known once more. As a lifelong resident of Willowbrook, I had heard the stories of the scarecrow since I was a child. The legends claim that it was created decades ago by an eccentric farmer who had dabbled in dark, forbidden arts to protect his crops. The scarecrow was said to have a sinister life of its own, fueled by the farmer's malevolent intent. According to the tales, the scarecrow would only come to life on Halloween night, seeking out souls to feed its insatiable hunger. While most of us regarded these stories as nothing more than superstition, there were those in the town who swore they had witnessed the scarecrow moving of its own accord on Halloween night. It was a creepy tradition in Willowbrook for the bravest souls to venture out and search for the scarecrow during the darkest hours of the holiday, hoping to glimpse the malevolent figure. This Halloween, my friends and I decided to take on the challenge. We were teenagers now, and the tales of the sinister scarecrow were nothing more than spooky legends to us. Armed with our flashlights, we set out on our eerie adventure, determined to debunk the folklore that had terrified generations of Willowbrook's children. Our journey led us through moonlit fields, past barns and cornfields, and eventually to the edge of the forest that bordered the town. The night was still, and the only sound was the rustling of the leaves in the chilly breeze. Our flashlights cut through the darkness like thin beams of hope. As we entered the forest, a sense of foreboding settled over us. The tall trees cast long, shadowy fingers that reached out to touch us. The deeper we ventured into the woods, the more our unease grew. It was as though the air itself had thickened, carrying an unsettling aura. After what felt like hours, we stumbled upon a clearing, and there, standing amidst the moonlight, was the sinister scarecrow. It was a disturbing sight to see, its tattered clothes hanging in ragged shreds. Its straw-stuffed body swayed eerily in the breeze, and its pumpkin head, carved with a malevolent grin, cast an eerie glow. We exchanged nervous glances and whispered theories about how someone had probably placed the scarecrow there to keep up Halloween tradition. We were skeptics, after all. But as we approached the scarecrow, my flashlight flickered, casting the figure in a ghostly light. Suddenly, with a creaking of weathered wood and rustling straw, the scarecrow came to life. Its head turned to face me, and I found myself locked in its malevolent gaze. Panic surged through me, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. The scarecrow's eyes seemed to glow with an outer-worldly light. As the scarecrow reached out its hand, I felt a wave of cold dread wash over me. I stumbled back, my heart pounding, and my friends let out terrified cries. The scarecrow advanced, its steps awkward yet deliberate, as if it had been waiting for us. In a desperate bid to escape, we scattered in different directions, but the scarecrow was relentless, pursuing each of us with unnatural speed. It seemed to be everywhere at once, an embodiment of our deepest fears. One by one, the scarecrow caught up to each of my friends, their terrified screams echoing through the forest. I could do nothing but watch in horror as they were dragged towards the malevolent figure, their struggles futile against its unnatural strength. I knew I had to find a way to escape this nightmare, but the sinister scarecrow was closing in on me. With every step, it seemed to grow larger, more grotesque, and more threatening. It was as though it fed on our fear, growing stronger with each passing moment. Desperation drove me deeper into the woods, but the scarecrow was relentless. The moon was now hidden behind a shroud of clouds, plunging the forest into impenetrable darkness. My flashlight was long gone, and I stumbled blindly through the trees. As I ran, I could hear the malevolent laughter of the scarecrow, a chilling sound that filled me with dread. It seemed to taunt me, to mock my feeble attempts at escape. The night was endless, and the forest was a maze of confusion. Finally, when I was on the brink of exhaustion, I stumbled out of the woods and onto a moonlit field. The town of Willowbrook lay in the distance, its lights a welcoming sight. With every ounce of strength left in me, I sprinted towards safety, leaving the scarecrow behind. The scarecrow had vanished, but the terror it instilled in me remained. Willowbrook had been forever changed that Halloween night. The sinister scarecrow was no longer just a legend. It was a malevolent reality. And as long as the moon still casts its silvery light on Halloween, the people of Willowbrook will live in fear of the sinister scarecrow's return, a reminder that some legends are born of the darkest of truths. Halloween was my favorite time of the year, the one night when you could be anyone or anything you wanted, where the streets filled with witches, superheroes, and monsters of all kinds. But I had a reputation to uphold. I was the girl who always had the best and scariest costume at our annual Halloween party, and I couldn't let this year be an exception. As October rolled around, I began scouring thrift stores and costume shops in search of the perfect outfit. My determination led me to a dusty, forgotten thrift store tucked away in a quiet corner of town. The store had an outer-worldly aura, its shelves lined with discarded possessions of strangers. That's where I found it, a costume that sent shivers down my spine. It was unlike anything I had ever seen. It was so realistic. The outfit appeared to be an intricate zombie ensemble, complete with tattered clothing, decaying flesh, and ghastly wounds. It was a work of art, or rather, a work of terror. I couldn't believe my luck. I had discovered a hidden gem in the sea of discarded clothes. The costume felt strangely real as I tried it on. The latex mask clung to my face, and the fabric of the clothing melted with my skin, creating an eerie sensation of being one with the costume. It was perfect. The scare factor was off the charts, and I knew it would make me the star of the Halloween party. The evening of the party arrived, and I couldn't wait to unveil my horrifying creation. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I pulled on the costume and observed myself in the mirror. The transformation was complete. My face was now a grotesque, rotting visage, and the clothes clung to me as if I were a genuine reanimated corpse. With a sense of satisfaction, I headed to the party. The reactions were everything I had hoped for. My friends were a mixture of awe and terror as they looked at me. The costume had exceeded my wildest expectations, and I reveled in the gasps and screams of delight. Throughout the night, I danced and socialized, the costume becoming a part of me, both physically and emotionally. I was a zombie, a creature of the night, and I reveled in the sensation of embodying a character straight from the pages of a horror novel. As the party continued, I began to notice something strange. The costume was no longer just something I was wearing. It had become a part of me in a way that defied explanation. The latex mask was no longer a mask. It was my face. The clothing wasn't just clothing. It was my skin. Panic began to set in as I realized I couldn't remove the costume. Desperation and fear welled up as I struggled to peel off the mask, but it was futile. It was as if the costume had merged with my flesh. My hands tore at the fabric, my nails scratching at the latex, but the mask remained attached to my face, the illusion of rot and decay becoming an eerie reality. My friends, who had initially been impressed by my costume, now watched in horror as I attempted to free myself. Their laughter turned to concern, and they tried to help, but nothing could separate the mask from my skin. As the night wore on, I grew increasingly fatigued, the weight of the costume pressing down on me. The fabric clung to my body, my movements hampered by the latex mask. It was as if I had become a true zombie, trapped in an eternal night of Halloween. In a fit of desperation, I fled the party and returned to the thrift store where I had found the cursed costume. The old store felt colder and darker, the shelves filled with eerie silence. The shopkeeper, a mysterious figure with eyes like shadows, looked at me knowingly. "I see you've discovered the costume's secret," he said, his voice a low, haunting whisper. "It comes at a price, you know." Tears welled in my eyes, and I begged him for a solution, but he offered no assistance. The costume had become a part of me, and I was now bound to it. There was no escape. With heavy steps, I left the thrift store, my heart heavy with the weight of my predicament. I was now condemned to walk the earth as a zombie, a creature of horror and decay. The Halloween night that had once brought me joy had become a never-ending nightmare. As the years passed, I roamed the streets, my appearance terrifying all who crossed my path. I became a legend, a living nightmare, the girl who couldn't remove her Halloween costume. The seasons changed, and I remained trapped in a perpetual Halloween, forever the embodiment of fear and the unknown. My life was now a twisted version of the Halloween fantasy I had once embraced. The costume that had once been a source of pride had become my curse, and I was fated to wander the world as a living zombie, a symbol of the terrifying power of Halloween.